Hi, and welcome to Chapter 14 now. We are going to dedicate this video to the muscles of the hip and thigh, and we are going to give special attention to that of muscle strain. I see a lot of muscle strains occurring at the hip and the thigh region, typically to do with muscle weakness. And so I want to talk to you today about three things, and that is the cause, the care, and the prevention of these muscle strains that occur at the hip and thigh region. So let's first look at the cause. What happens to cause a muscle strain in the first place? Well, we know from earlier chapters that eccentric activity of a muscle is typically when a muscle strain will occur. And so what I have here for a prop in this video is I have a rubber band. It's actually a TheraBand, something that I use for therapy. But you understand the idea of a rubber band is that it can be expanded and it will rebound. And so let's look at it this way. If I have a muscle and it's going to be strained, it's going to be strained because it is lengthening but yet contracting at the same time. And so let's take that concept, that eccentric contraction concept, and let's look at it in this diagram behind me here. What we have first is a runner going kind of uphill. And I have marked three areas that I find to be the most common areas of muscle strain in a runner. But this is any sport that involves running as a component. So let's look at this diagram and let's see how this leg that's moving forward here has a red line that is kind of at the hamstring area. Because when the leg moves forward into hip flexion, the hamstring is the muscle that is being used eccentrically to control the hip. And that is the typical position of a hamstring strain. Now, I've got him kind of going up a hill a little bit, and so I've got this knee bent, and that's just so kind of you can see. But many times with a sprinter or someone who is sprinting, that leg will be extended more at the knee joint. And so you'll see more of that eccentric motion happening there at the hamstring muscle. Notice on that back leg that's moving backward, it's not really moving backward, but it's kind of going behind him, and you'll see that red mark is down around the quad area because the quadriceps, specifically the rectus femoris muscle, is very susceptible to strain as the leg moves underneath the body and then behind the body, and that is the eccentric component of that bicep or that rectus femoris muscle in the running gait. Also, I put a red mark along the rectus abdominis, or the core or the abdominal muscle area. And I do see quite a few muscle strains here, and I realize this is not part of the hip and thigh as we know it, but this is a very common area to see muscle strains occur right along in the rectus abdominis, or that six-pack ab area. And then over here on figure B, I've got this guy, and he's clearly doing a squat with a weight. And this squatting action, I typically see muscle strains occurring at the adductors, and that is commonly known as the groin muscles. And so the groin muscles pull the knees to midline or medially in the squatting motion. As this guy is going down, what you see are the knees going out and flexing, but then as they go out into abduction and the bottom end of this character goes down, then what you see is a strain because of eccentrics at the adductor muscles. Also, take a look at the two lines around his lower spine. I also see, and you probably know this very well, many times a strain will occur at the lumbar section of the spine. And so this is kind of the common areas and causes of muscle strains in the core as well as the hip and thigh region. Now, what does good care mean? Well, good care comes from these three rules right here, and it's the 3 R's of muscle strains. And this goes with every muscle strain, but very specifically with these, because these can become problematic in athletes in that we don't take care of them right, and then the next thing you know, you're dealing with a re-injury. And so the first thing on the list is RICE. Again, that's 72 to 96 hours of rest, ice, compression, and elevation. The next thing you want to do is you want to rehab, but you want to make it appropriate. And I have a video below that talks about our favorite exercises for muscle strains of the core, hips, and thighs. But when these muscle strains happen, it's very important that you let them heal to a point that they're ready to rehab. And so that usually comes with a pain-free gait. Now, what that means is they're not limping anymore. And once they start to walk without much of a limp, and I would almost say it needs to be at no less than 95% gone, then they can begin doing rehab, and that video below will show you those exercises. And then the last thing is return. Now, I realize that a lot of people think that return is return to full play, but there is some restrictions, and this is a phase of our care that we really want to give a lot of attention to, because I don't want to turn a kid loose back to full practice or play without restriction and expect that he not get injured again, because many times they will turn out there and they will think that they can do everything that they want to do, but that muscle weakness is still there. And maybe it just didn't have enough time in that rehab phase to get secure. And so it's really important that we watch, we monitor, we supervise, we do all those things that we prudently should be doing anyways to make sure that our athlete does not have a re-injury. So return is very critical. One of the other things that I've included is return to running program below, and I want you to take a look at that and kind of just notice that what we do is we let pain be our self-limiting guide. And if they have pain, then they need to slow down, they need to maybe remediate in the phase before, but the biggest thing is that they don't advance, that we don't turn them loose and hope for the best, because that just simply doesn't always work. It's not a good method to follow. The last thing on my list is prevention. And I don't really have these written down behind me, but I will list these for you. My biggest thing for prevention of muscle strains occurring to the thigh, hip, and the core is that we do muscle strengthening. And now muscle strengthening can occur in several different ways. As a coach, you will do things in a very methodical, sport-specific way. What I want you to remember is that for all sports, even running and even volleyball, even soccer, even basketball, whatever you want to tell me that you're going to coach, all of these sports can benefit from three basic lower extremity movements. The first, and my favorite up here, is the squat. There are three variations of the squat that I want you to kind of keep in mind. This is a picture of a guy with the barbell behind his neck. That's called a back squat. I also like some type of front squat, and then also a free weight squat, like a dumbbell squat, that changes up the direction of resistance. So a back squat, a front squat, and a free weight squat, just to keep some good variation going to attract different muscle fiber growth. But then the next thing I like all of our athletes to do is a deadlift. Now again, there's variations of deadlift. The two variations that I want to kind of talk about are that with a straight Olympic bar, kind of like what our diagram B would have, putting that in the front and having a bent knee to perform the deadlift with. You can see videos about proper form for deadlift. The other is a straight leg deadlift. And these two are very different exercises, and they will affect similar muscles, but they have a little different effect on those muscles because of the straight knee versus the bent knee. And so the third preventative exercise, muscle strengthening exercise that I want to mention is a lunge. And a lunge is many times left out. Lunges can be done with dumbbells, they can be done with barbells. The important thing is, they can be done with no weight at all. The important thing to remember is that there are 6 variations of lunges that I like to do. And I will show those to you in our care video below. But keep in mind that those lunge techniques can be done, again, with no weight at all and be very effective in strengthening our thigh, hip, and core. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope you've learned something from it. Make sure you let me know in the video summary below. Have a good day.